Welcome to video number 6 in my Dispy primer on Christian nationalism. In this video, I want to do a quick overview of the trio of videos I'm going to do next under the heading of Dispies and New Testament priority and odd alliance. As dispensationalists, one of the things we champion is the concept that particularly the Old Testament scriptures stand on their own. They are authoritative. We don't need New Testament revelation in order to interpret those texts, but those Old Testament texts, the meaning is there and it's clear. Not as clear as maybe it could be, but we don't reinterpret them. They're not abrogated by the New Testament. And yet, I've noticed this really odd phenomenon amongst dispensationalists. On the one hand, they will say, oh, yes, all scripture is God breathed and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, right? 2 Timothy 3:16, a text we all love, knowing that Paul has primarily in mind the Old Testament scriptures. And so they'll, on the one hand, say, oh, yes, these Old Testament scriptures are profitable for teaching and for training. And then on the other hand, they'll simultaneously say, well, you know what? I don't see Jesus and the apostles engaging in politics and attempting to change culture. So they practice this New Testament priority where if Jesus or the apostles don't talk about it, then it's just not relevant for contemporary life. It's a very interesting contradiction. And another way this is experienced is with their readings of the book of Proverbs. We all love the book of Proverbs. It's been noted that there's a chapter in the book that corresponds to each day of the month, right? So on the first of the month, you can read chapter 1. You can go through the whole book or just about every month and go over the book month after month after month. And we mostly remember that the book of Proverbs was written by a Mosaic covenant-keeping theocratic king. Right, it's about as far from us as you can get. I mean, this guy's a theocratic king under the Mosaic covenant, and he's writing his book to his sons, who are princes, one of which will be a king. All of them will be rulers, civil leaders. And he's writing about how to rule and reign and live righteously within Israel under the Mosaic covenant in a theocratic nation. And so we read this book and we study this book about how to live righteously in a contemporary 21st century society. We do that. But then, on the other hand, we say, well, if Jesus and the apostles didn't tell us how to address politics and culture, I guess that's just not something we're supposed to be doing. So we use the book of Proverbs on one hand, and then on the other hand, we pretend that only the New Testament is relevant for our engaging of culture and politics. So this is what I mean by Dispies and New Testament priority and odd alliance. Now, the trio of videos that I'm going to look at are number one, the cultural mandate, and particularly its relationship to the Great Commission. And we'll look at New Testament priority and the cultural mandate. We've already touched on the cultural mandate a little bit in a previous video. I'm going to look at it again. The second video I'll do is the WWJD fallacy. It is the what would Jesus do fallacy. And number three, I'm going to look at sojourner theology. This is such a common theology, particularly with contemporary evangelicals, where we say that, our identity is that we are sojourners. But that's really based on a particular reading of First Peter in particular. So I want to look at that and address that and challenge that view just a little bit. After that trio of videos, I'm going to move on to looking at a text that's used so often today. My kingdom is not of this world. It's oftentimes thrown out, particularly by dispensationalists, as if that text is some kind of defeater against Christian nationalism, as if my kingdom is not of this world then informs how civil magistrates are supposed to rule and reign in this era. And I am going to make the argument that my kingdom is not of this world is really the John 3:16 of election. So when we talk about election, unconditional election, sometimes you'll have those who reject that doctrine just throw out John 3:16 as if it's some kind of defeater to the sovereign grace of God in election. And I think the same thing's happening with my kingdom is not of this world. It's thrown out as if it's some kind of weighty text that nobody in all of Protestantism who's argued for certain Christian obligations of the civil magistrate, as if nobody's ever considered that text before. And all of a sudden it comes in and it just shuts down the conversation. And I think it really needs to be treated like the John 3:16 of election. So that's a little overview of the next few videos. I hope you enjoy this next trio.